under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Excellent. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the electronic meeting procedure. We've had an update on the executive order. Dan, our legal counsel, please.
Thank you, Mayor. The governor has extended the authority for City Council and all public bodies to have and continue to have remote electronic meetings through the end of June. And so the council's already adopted procedures regarding the process for conducting electronic meetings should continue for as long as council wishes to, at least up until June 30th of next month. And certainly, Mayor, if you want me to go over again the process that you anticipate to use for call to audience, I'm happy to do that, or we could address that at that time.
I'm pretty good, and we will do the at call to audience, go over the rules again. Does that sound good? And I'm hearing some of my own feedback. Can people hear me?
Yes.
I think it's tough. I heard it for a second, but I think it's tough.
Okay. Unfortunately, my agenda is not loading.
Roll call, Your Honor.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is roll call. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember James.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May. Raylon, we can't hear you.
Here.
Thank you. Councilmember Mikulski.
Here.
Councilmember Polika.
Here.
And Mayor Piana.
Here. And next on the agenda is approval of the agenda.
Your Honor, I know you noted that you might wish to add an additional presentation from Commissioner Zach, perhaps as 5A, or but I want you to.
Yes, thank you. We're going to add Helene Zach as 5A, and the Cobalt Community Survey results summary presentation becomes 5B, as she is on the call tonight with us.
Madam Mayor, I will move to approve the agenda with the amendment of adding a presentation by Commissioner Zach as 5A and moving Cobalt Community Survey results to 5B.
Actually, is it possible to make an amendment to the agenda to move item, let's see, 8H and 8J to the regular agenda?
H as in Harry and J as in James?
Correct. Just for discussion purposes.
I'll accept that as a friendly amendment.
Support.
All right, moved by James and supported by Leaks May. Madam Clerk, can we have a roll call, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May.
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski.
Yes.
Councilmember Polika.
Yes.
Councilmember James.
Yes.
And Mayor Piana.
Yes. All right, next on the agenda is presentations, and I welcome County Commissioner Helene Zach, who is joining us via phone on Zoom this evening. Welcome, Commissioner.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. It's a pleasure to be here. It took me a little bit of time. I couldn't sign in a couple weeks ago, but I figured it out this week. Like all levels of government, county government has been very busy. One of the things that I want to remind people is that county government is responsible for public health and homeland security. So many of the public health orders locally come out of county government. A couple of things that you should know about. We were very fortunate a couple weeks ago. We received $219 million under the CARES Act that is directly coming into the county. And through that, one of the things that we appropriated right away was $12 million more for the Small Business Initiative. And I participated in the District 12 group, which included Hazel Park, Ferndale, Oak Park, Pleasant Ridge, and Royal Oak Township. And we were able to distribute this second round roughly $577,000 into businesses in our District 12. And Ferndale businesses roughly, and these are rough numbers, I didn't count up, somewhere around 70 businesses received money. And the minimum amount that they ended up receiving was $3,500 with the intent that, and these are gifts, they're grants, they're not loans. And then we did give some additional money to the Rust Belt, recognizing that they are really helping micro businesses. And so they did receive some additional money. It was really a wonderful collaborative group, and amazing that we were able to try and help our small businesses. We do have county testing now on Monday. You have some symptoms, or you feel you need to be tested, you need to call the nurse online number, which is 248-848-5533, and make an appointment. And it's been, I heard from our health officer today, it's about a 3-minute happening through the county going to the tents where people are waiting in line. So it's been really efficient. And we hope to be able, right now, I think we can do somewhere around 250 tests a day. Once we get more testing equipment, tests, we have capacity to do more. And we do have a couple of the Abbott lab machines, but we're unable to get those quick tests yet, but we're working on it. Additional things that we're spending the COVID money on, lots of personal PPE equipment distributed around the county. There's a tremendous project of working with senior facilities, feeding them, testing them, our most vulnerable citizens. We've been collaborating with all of the different homeless shelters, helping feed them, house them. It's been a tremendous effort. Presently, I do want to let you know that Oakland County parks are open presently. There's no charge, so you don't have to collect money. Golf courses are free, but you can't use any type of cart. And so they're available. Dog parks are still closed, and the water parks are not going to open this summer. Just like the cities have decided that they can't staff and so forth, where our water parks are not going to be open. So those are some of the things going on from my end, and I don't want to take up too much time. Are there any questions for me? Thank you for allowing me to join you tonight.
Thank you. I just wanted to say how amazing you've been to work with. As this pandemic started, and you really helped out the city managers last week connecting to the right county parks person. So thank you so much for making things happen in a very short period of time.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to team with all of the communities I represent.
Well, thank you for being here, and we hope to see you back sometime soon. All right, next on the agenda is the Cobalt Community Survey Results Summary Presentation.
And who is introducing this? Oh, Joe? Unmute.
Whoops. I said through the chair, the Assistant City Manager, Kyle Paulette, will introduce this.
Excellent, thank you.
Thanks, Joe. So we have with us tonight William St. Amour, who is with Cobalt Community Research, and he has put together a slideshow presentation of some of the interesting results that we got back from this survey. He will go over what the survey looked like, how we distributed it, but I do want to just say that this was a survey that was sent out to 1,500 Ferndale residents through mail, and we did get back some really good feedback, and I think that this research is going to really assist us as we move forward with our Ferndale Moves plan, with the next time we have to do the master plan. So it's kind of a great community touch point, especially considering that we received this data right before we kind of went into COVID mode. So this is kind of a snapshot of where the community was on March 16th or the week before that, which is when the survey results were due. And I think this is going to be a great baseboard of sort of where the city's going to go as we start entering into COVID recovery and thinking about what the city looks like in a post-COVID world. So with that, I'll hand it over to William, who will run us through. And, we will also make this available to residents so that they can download. And then we will also make available a Community 360 report, which is part of the research that we paid for, which basically gives a preview to what we're going to see in the census and a whole lot more data that we just didn't, weren't able to put together ourselves, or to be honest, didn't even know to look for. It's extremely thorough, and I'm very pleased with this product. So, William, if you go ahead, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you, Kyle. I will move through fairly quickly, but let me know if you have any questions as we go through. So as background, Cobalt is a 501c3 not-for-profit research coalition. We work with communities across the country on projects just like this one. There are several reasons why you want to do research like this. Number one is really just making sure that you continue to keep your fingers on the pulse of community values and priorities as you go into this kind of planning effort that you're looking at, and especially as you're looking at budget decisions and some of the other things that you're looking at in the next few months. It helps you understand better what are the perceptions of your residents and the behaviors that are driven by those perceptions. Helps you improve and promote the city and really tell your story. What is it that's going on with the city? What do people care about? What are the things that you're trying to achieve? It does support difficult decisions as you're looking at potential changes to your budget in the next year or two. It does help you balance the demands of vocal groups with the reality of limited resources. Some of the groups that might be particularly vocal might be right, might be wrong. Having this kind of data helps you put that in perspective and also helps you kind of shape the priorities of it. And ultimately, it is just a good bottom line practice to continue to build trust, to build that relationship with the community so that you know what they want to see and that you can make sure that you're providing that to them and then telling the story so that they know that you're providing that to them as well. Several things we wanted to do with this particular study. So number one, we wanted to support the budget and strategic planning decisions you're going into. We also wanted to look at the baseline service measures, looking at some of these survey questions that we looked at not only this year, but also 10 years ago. We did this back in 2009. And so there's some really interesting changes from then to today. We also wanted to look at which aspects of community provide the greatest leverage on satisfaction. In other words, as you look at all of the different kinds of experiences that community members have living in the community, what are the things that are the most impactful for them remaining in the community, recommending it to others, encouraging businesses to start up in the community, and all those kind of things. We also do a lot of benchmarking with this study, so you can see what your performance looks like, not only to similarly sized communities in Michigan, but to Michigan overall, to the region, national, and also to non-governmental entities that your residents might be in contact with. Because when they're thinking about customer service, it's not just your service compared to the community next door, but it's compared to the bank, compared to all of these other kinds of organizations. So it really gives you some excellent context to look at these types of issues. Jumping straight to the bottom line, the city does very well on the survey. So you increased your scores over 2019 in most cases, and you also outperformed the benchmarks in most cases. For 2020, the ACSI score, which is the American Customer Satisfaction Score, that was a 72. And this is on a scale of 0 to 100, and 72 is very solid. For context, you had a 67 back in 2009, so that was a nice bump. When we look at communities for similarly sized communities in Michigan, the score was a 63, so you're about 9 points above similar communities in the state. When we look at the Midwest, it's 64 and 61 nationally. So you're in a very solid position from an experiential standpoint and how folks are in terms of their satisfaction with the community. Diving in, looking specifically at how satisfied people are with local government management, you scored a 72. It was a 68 back in 2009. Michigan, for similarly sized communities, scored a 58. So you are 14 points above the benchmark in that particular case. In the Midwest, it was 62, and national 54. So again, doing very well. You're in a solid position. Are you perfect? No, but you're doing a lot of things very well. There are several areas where improvement has the most leverage on improving your results. So these aren't things that you're necessarily doing bad, but these are the things that are basically giving you the most bang for the buck as you invest in them and as you continue to improve them going forward. And those items are, again, city government management, the economy, local schools, taxes, shopping, and parks. There are a number of tools that are available to you as you plan and as you develop policy. Most important is really looking at the thermal mapping that we do in the crosstabs. And I'll give you an example of that in a minute. You've got the comparison scores, and then you've also got scores with non-governmental entities. Just to give you a sense of some of the entities that are measured with the American Customer Satisfaction Index, you can see Google and Amazon and FedEx and Facebook. A lot of very well-known organizations are measured with this particular tool. If we look at the public sector, Department of Energy, you can see the Internal Revenue Service, the National Weather Service, Veterans Affairs. All of these are just some of the federal entities that are measured as well. And anyone who wants to look at these scores for any of these kind of entities, they can do that at www.theacsi.org. This is publicly available information that you can look at, and it trends back a number of years. I talked about the thermal mapping in the crosstabs, and this is a tiny sample of what that shows. So essentially, every question in the survey is its own column. We look at the 2009 compared to the 2020 scores, and then we break down the results by every demographic group that we captured in the city. So whether they own or lease, or household income, marital status, and there's a whole raft of things that we look at, and this is just a tiny sample. But essentially what this allows you to do is for any of these individual groups, you can see what the responses are to individual questions. And the reason that's important is because sometimes when you're looking at the overall numbers, the voices of individual groups might be lost, particularly if they're a smaller group. And this is a great way of being able to see, are people being pretty consistent with their views? In which case you're going to have a consistent coloration, like the blue all the way down. Or you're seeing some differences in some of these demographic groups, and that's where you see a little bit more of this checkering. And that gives you as a council the tool so that when you're out in the community, as you're in the grocery store or chatting with someone, instead of generally asking, how are things going, you can be much more specific in terms of a particular question for someone from a particular demographic group to get their ideas on how to make that better. So it's just a much more granular conversation that you can have and to get that kind of feedback to continue to move the city forward. Diving into methodology, as Kyle mentioned, it was a random sample to 1,500 residents. It was a true random sample. We did 2 mailings back in February and March. We heard back from 597 residents, which is fantastic. That gives us a margin of error of plus or minus 4.3%. People often ask for a community our size, is that a large enough sample for us to make decisions? And I like to point out that for a national survey, for 330 million people across the nation, to get to plus or minus 5%, you only need to hear from 384 responses, if they're randomly collected, to get that kind of accurate mirroring of national opinion. So the fact that you have 597 for a community your size means that your data really is pretty solid. We also heard back from about 29 people who were not part of the sample. So that brings your total response to 626 people. And if you were to line them up outside City Hall, keeping 6-foot distance, that would be a very, very long line. From a statistical standpoint, we do like to note that the 29 people were not included with the overall numbers and the numbers in the crosstabs in general. But there is one row in the crosstabs where we break out the response for that particular cohort. So you can see what their response pattern is compared to residents overall. All right, diving into the results. So first of all, looking at the color coding on these graphs, the light blue is Ferndale back in 2009. The darker blue is Ferndale today. The light gray, similarly sized communities in Michigan. The dark gray is Michigan overall. The orange is for the Midwest. Light green, national, similarly sized communities, and the dark green is national communities overall. So a couple of things I'd like to point out. First of all, in all of these cases on this particular graph, you can see that Ferndale is outperforming the benchmarks, and you have improved from 2009. The exception to that is really being a community volunteer. You can see it jumped up quite a bit, and you're still above the Michigan benchmarks, a little bit lagging behind the national ones. So that's something that could be a communication or a coordination kind of thing to look at. But overall, doing very well from that standpoint. Community image, there's a number of pieces to this in terms of questions that are driven by it. You can see the image overall, your score went up compared to 2009. Again, same pattern, your scores went up and you're outperforming the benchmarks in most cases. Your score was a little bit lower here when we look at an enjoyable place for ages 56 and older. So there you're still above most of the benchmarks, but you're not quite outperforming them as much as you had. A couple of these charts I wanted to point out, there's some gaps. So if we look at an enjoyable place for ages 36 to 55, you only see the Ferndale responses and not the benchmarks. And that's because it's not part of the standard benchmarking that we do every year. Also, you can see an enjoyable place for people to visit. You don't see that light blue line showing Ferndale in 2009, and that's because we didn't ask the question in 2009. Some additional community image questions. So a great place for families, a great place to have a business. Again, we see that pattern of the scores improving and outperforming the benchmarks. A safe place to bike and walk, particularly high, very high scores in terms of a place that supports and celebrates diversity and an inclusive place for everyone. We had a number of questions dealing with experiences that your residents have with the community, some of which are directly controlled by the local government and some of them are not. But to give you a sense for some that you have more direct influence over, fire performance in terms of fire services, you can see your scores are fantastic. Transportation, this is one of the few areas where your scores actually dropped a bit, and that was driven mainly by road maintenance when I look at the individual questions. We can see police services, strong performing for the library, a little bit weaker with taxes. This is common. We see low performance here for every community that we work with, but you can see that your scores went up compared to 2009, and again, you're outperforming the benchmarks. Looking at some of the areas that you don't have as much influence over, the schools overall, huge improvement compared to 2009. Utilities doing very solid. Your shopping went up. That's an area that's a little bit of a lower scoring area for you, as well as the economy overall, which is a little bit of a softer area. We'll go into those in a little bit more detail here in a few minutes. In the events overall, you're doing very, very well from the perspective of improvements over 2009 and to the benchmarks. Okay, the next couple slides that I'm going to look at take those data points and we plot them out. So on the vertical, you have the performance on that scale of 0 to 100. So the highest scoring things are toward the top, low scoring things are toward the bottom. And then we give them a horizontal amount of movement based on the impact relationship that they have with those overall satisfaction elements and those outcome behaviors like people remaining in the community and recommending it to others and those kind of things. So let me go into that here. So what you see are your relatively high scoring areas in the top, your relatively lower scoring areas in the bottom. And one of the things I want to point out right off the bat is that there's only a couple of areas that are in this bottom quadrant. So 3A, which is transportation overall, and 12A, which is the economy overall. But even with those scores, they are still very solid scores. You're at about a 63 with those. This has somewhat limited use from an analytical standpoint. So what we always like to do is drop in a crosshair on that cluster to give you some of the relative impact and performance of each of these areas, so that ultimately, as you're thinking about strategic planning, things that are in this upper right quadrant, these are things that you're doing well, that have a lot of leverage on those outcomes. And things in the bottom right quadrant are things that you're doing relatively less well, that have a lot of impact on those outcomes. So these are the things that will improve and move your score up. These are the things you want to continue doing well and even improve to move your score up. Things that are over in the upper left-hand quadrant, they're there because they're pretty much optimized in terms of the amount of impact that they have, particularly when you're looking at fire and you're looking at police. So this does not mean that they're not important. Consistently, we see with every community that we talk to, people say these are extremely vital services. But what this tells you is that when people are deciding which community to move to or why to invite their friends to the community, it's not because of the fire department or the police department. People are encouraging people to move into the community, or they're staying in the community because of things like, it's a well-run place. You've got great parks. All of these kind of things on the right-hand side are the things that are really influencing that kind of decision. The items on the left-hand side continue to be important, continue to be vital from a safety and security and all of those things that you need to do to keep the lights on. These are the things that differentiate you from a satisfaction, retention, and growth standpoint. Okay, diving into one of the thicker charts, this is looking at government management and a number of different elements to that. As we saw with the prior charts, you're outperforming the benchmarks in most cases, and your scores have gone up compared to 2009. I'd like to point out some of the high points. So first of all, we see this very high point over here, which is the level of professionalism of local staff, of the local government staff. You can see the follow-up provided by staff is very high. The ease of getting your questions answered, having employees who are well-trained. These are all things that reflect that the staff working at the city are just doing a really solid job for residents, and that residents do see that. And that's important because not all communities are like that. This is something that takes years and years of development. It takes, cultural foundations. It takes deliberate leadership. It takes just hiring great people to be able to do that kind of thing. It doesn't happen accidentally, and you're doing a good job with it. Other areas that I like to point out, having leaders who are trustworthy. You can see that your scores there are very high also. And one of the things that comes, that tends to drive that is that people do feel like they're being heard, that their ideas, recommendations are being considered, and that from a communication standpoint, that kind of information is being shared back to them so that they know things are happening with those kind of ideas and recommendations. One of the lowest scoring areas is spending dollars wisely. We see that with every community again. You can see you're well above the benchmarks though. And typically that's because communities often don't spend a lot of time talking about how the decision process works for spending dollars and allocating those limited resources. So if this is something that you want to drive up a little bit, spending a little bit more time talking about that kind of process thing for those people who really get into the nuts and bolts of how those decisions are made and the intentionality and kind of the choices that you have to make would be a valuable use of your time. We looked at how often people have contacted City Hall, either by visiting in person, emailing, or calling. This does not include social media. So when we look at that, we can see that only about 18% have never contacted City Hall in the past 12 months. Most people, 1 to 6 times is pretty much how often they contact you. Looking at Parks and Recreation, again, we're seeing a pattern where your scores have increased. They've improved from 2009. You're pretty similar to most of the benchmarks in this particular area. You can see a pretty solid jump here in terms of parks and facilities meeting your needs, still lagging behind similar sized communities in Michigan. Park maintenance, that's gone up significantly, and here you are outperforming that benchmark. And then, pretty consistent with the benchmarks or slightly above them for your recreational programs, and both in terms of the quality and the variety. Looking at frequency of use in the past 12 months, you can see that only about 17% of your residents have never used Parks and Recreation in the past 12 months. You have very high utilization, and you can see much more of a spread in terms of the frequency of use. And in fact, if you look at the folks who are the heavier users, the 6 to 12 and the more than 12, that's more than 40% of your population. So you're having very heavy use of these particular programs and resources. Shopping. Shopping overall, you can see your scores went up. You're a bit above the benchmarks. Everyday items, pretty consistent with the benchmarks. Your shopping convenience for major items, you're lagging behind a bit. Sufficient choices for most of your needs. You can see that you're doing just fine. You're a little bit above the benchmarks there. But really the area that you're shining is the area of restaurant choices. When we look at the comments, people just love the variety of things that they can do, that they can walk to different restaurants, and generally the ability to enjoy that kind of experience in the community. Local schools, I mentioned that they had gone up significantly overall. Here you can see a little bit more detail in terms of those different components of where they've gone up. So meeting the needs of the community, preparation for solid careers, preparation for college, and communication with the public. All of these now are at or above the benchmark, so significant improvement compared to 2009. The area that's a little bit softer for them is the communication with the public. They're certainly right in line with the benchmarks, but that is relatively their lower score. So that would be one area that they could spend a little bit more time focusing on. Taxes. Everybody loves taxes. Scores have gone up. You can see the fairness of property appraisals. That's gone up, outperforming the benchmarks. Fairness of tax levels, you can see that it was pretty low back in 2009, and that's when that bubble popped, and so there were a lot of concerns regarding that, as well as with the appraisals. Here you can see that you are right at really the benchmarks. The thing that really jumps out to me in this particular chart is the amount and quality of services you receive for the dollars that you pay. And here you see that you're really outperforming the benchmark significantly. So, while people say, yeah, taxes, don't really want to pay them, yeah, they're fairly fair, don't want to pay them, but I'm getting something for my money. I can see that I'm getting value for those dollars. And that's something, again, that really sets Ferndale apart. Looking at the economy, it has gone up from 2009. The area that dropped for you was the affordability of housing. I think that's a little bit of a pull on you from this area. Obviously, we'll see what the year ahead brings us, but certainly that snapshot in time before COVID, this was the thing that was pulling you down a little bit. Strength of local economy, very high score. Stability of property values, very high score, but it really is the affordability and then the availability and quality of jobs. There were a few questions regarding communications that we dove into. Where do you go for local news? Number one is the internet, followed by TV stations and then newspapers. How do you prefer to receive information from the city? Number one is the newsletter. Number two, U.S. mail. And then 3 and 4 pretty much tied for email and the city website. And there is significant variation in terms of age for each of these different modes of communication, which is no surprise. So people who are older tend to prefer things like the newspaper. You can see from the shading that, lower scores, which are the darker kind of red, higher scores fade from white up until blue. So newspaper is more popular with your older residents. Email, website, Facebook, all of those tend to be modes that are preferred by your younger population. So as you're working through different kinds of messaging, you just need to be aware of which particular modes of communication you're going to put most of your effort into. Try to focus that in and dial that in to the modes that particular audience segment uses. And there's a lot more variation when you get to the crosstabs to play around with this too. Which social media do you use? Facebook is still number one, even though Facebook has softened up a little bit in the last couple of years. Instagram, though, is number two, and then YouTube. So YouTube might be an area that you explore a little bit more because that is evolving. Certainly Generation Z is a pretty heavy user of YouTube. So there's a number of neat things that you could do that are pretty creative in terms of building relationships and sharing information through that particular social media channel. TV stations. Channel 4 and Channel 7 are number 1 and number 2, followed by Fox. The Ferndale cable channel, pretty limited viewership. Which newspapers or websites do you read for local news? Number 1 is the Woodward Talk, followed by the Free Press, and then Ferndale Friends. In this survey, we wanted to make sure that we took a moment to ask folks what do they really like best about the city of Ferndale so you can continue to build on the strengths that you have in place. This particular word cloud shows the words that came up most often in those comments. And then over on the left-hand side, we try to capture some of the themes around those words to give you a sense of it. One of the things that I would encourage you to do is really take time to read the comments. Really, while there were a couple of comments that might be a little bit more challenging, overall, people really do have a lot of good things to say about the city. There's a lot of things that they love about it, and it makes you feel good going through and looking at those kind of things. But when we look at the word community, people talk about just generally their neighbors are friendly, nice people in general, that they're accepting, they're open, they're kind. Walkable. People love the ability to go to shops and restaurants and just ride their bike or walk over to them. They love the green space. They love that the community is pretty bike friendly. And then diversity is a huge area. So the community is progressive. It's inclusive. People feel like they can be themselves within the town. Again, fantastic things for the city to be proud of. So that concludes the summary presentation. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions from council at this time or comments?
I had a quick question. On page 35, where you note that we can see the full list of comments for context, where can we access those comments?
So the comments are part of the report that William presented to us from Cobalt. And they're going to be found in the report PDF, which is going to be made available through a link to Cobalt's website.
Okay. Thank you.
Is that right, William? I think they're down at the bottom of that report.
Yeah, we can make sure everything is there. Well, hearing no other comments, again, thank you for the opportunity to work with the city again. I can see a ton of progress from 2009. I have family members that have recently moved into Ferndale, and I hear nothing but great things. So thank you for the opportunity to work with you, and I wish you great luck in your planning process.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the comprehensive presentation on all this data. I am really pleased that the schools have increased satisfaction over the decade. When I ran for council in 2009, that was the #1 issue I heard at the door. And so seeing an increase in our residents supporting the school district and the education that their kids are receiving is really pleasing to see. And then of course, I am thrilled about the level of satisfaction residents have with how our local government is being run. We work very hard to make sure that we get it right and are a leader in our field, particularly with city staff. And so I just wanted to say thank you to our staff and city manager for your level of professionalism and going, in many cases, above and beyond so many times. So with that, seeing no other comment, we are going to move on to the next item on the agenda, and that is call to audience. We have put aside 30 minutes for the call to audience, and we ask residents to limit their speaking to 3 minutes, and that there is a rule change now, that this is our third meeting that we're doing it, is that you can speak on anything on the agenda.
You do not have to wait until that agenda item under the regular agenda. So there are procedures for this electronic meeting, and I am not going to read it word for word because it's quite lengthy, but they do follow the governor's executive order number 2020-15, which temporarily suspends the Michigan Open Meetings Act. And so assisting tonight with managing public comments is our Assistant City Manager, Kyle, and we will be taking comments one person at a time, and we will be starting with Zoom participants, and you can go in and raise your hand under the participants. Is one way you can signal your interest in speaking, but Kyle will also be unmuting folks who I think who have an interest in speaking. And then we will move on to residents who are calling in by phone, and we will take your comment by the last names through the alphabet. And we'll go in through that to make sure everybody has an opportunity to speak. Dan, did I miss anything?
No, Your Honor. I think you certainly hit the high points.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to hand this over to Kyle to start managing public comment with Zoom. And I'm going to mute myself and change out my headset. The power is dying, so don't mind me here in the background.
Thank you, Mayor. So we have two hand raisers already. First was Jason McCaffrey. Jason, you should be able to unmute yourself now and give your comment.
I'm unmuted. Can you guys hear me? So one thing I just want to say at the start is my wife is also here. We logged into one Zoom. Can she speak after me?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, my name is Jason McCaffrey, and I live at 253 Flowerdale. I live next door to 243 Flowerdale, which is an Airbnb that we've had issues with. I'd like to start by saying that I like Airbnbs. My wife and I have used them in the past when we travel, and will likely do so again in the future. And I was honestly excited when I first learned the house next door was going to be an Airbnb because I was excited about meeting all of the travelers. But living next door to this particular Airbnb has been less than ideal in the about 2 years that it's been one. The issue that made this come to a head is there was a party there on May 2nd, which had at least 15 people at it. It looked like way more both in and out of the house, but we counted 15 cars on our block. None of the partygoers were wearing masks. Many people were hanging out in the driveway, which in typical Ferndale fashion is only a few feet from our living room windows. This party was a real problem for multiple reasons. One, we felt unsafe in our own home. Two, it was technically illegal, as renting Airbnbs to anyone but first responders goes against the governor's stay-at-home order. And three, unrelated to COVID, this is just another in a number of incidents of this particular Airbnb disturbing the neighborhood. I tried a few approaches once it was clear there was indeed a party happening. I called and texted the host the same night. My call went to voicemail after 2.5 rings, and my texts were ignored. When I called her the next day, she answered, but then hung up on me, and when I asked what she was going to do moving forward to keep our neighborhood safe. The night of the party, we called the police, as we have in the past in this particular Airbnb, and they broke the party up. When we called back the next day to see what was done, they referred us to the records department, but said they were likely only given a warning. And we were told since the renters will always be first-time offenders, they will likely always get a warning. And since the host is never in attendance, the Airbnb host does not get a ticket. So the police are ineffective in kind of... I also reached out to Airbnb, and they responded, quote, "We appreciate your response and cooperation in this matter, but unfortunately we are still unable to identify the specific violation of legality in question. As a result, we cannot take further action at this time," end quote, despite me having cited the governor's order specifically in my complaint to them. So I mentioned these three avenues I've gone down: contacting the host, contacting the police, and contacting Airbnb, to illustrate just how little leverage for the neighbors of a problematic Airbnb. We have no more levers to pull, and it's extremely frustrating. I've been told by various members of City Council for 2 years that there are discussions around regulating Airbnbs. I know we've had a changing of the guard in that time, but I'm here to implore you to please pick this issue back up and get some regulations on the books as fast as possible. Ferndale's Code of Ordinances does talk about public lodging houses, which perfectly defines an Airbnb, but Airbnbs aren't held to that standard. I can't find any answer anywhere on if they're at least held to the rental property inspection standards, but I suspect they're not. And I don't know what the rules and regulations should be, but I'd be happy to be involved in helping to define them. And I will say that there should be some significant barriers to entry, so only motivated Airbnb owners end up with Airbnbs, because living next to a lazy Airbnb owner's rental property is awful. And that is all of my comments, and I'm going to pass the mic to my wife, Jonna Malinowski.
Hello, my name's Jonna Malinowski, and I live at 253 Flowerdale. I would like to comment on the same issue, but make a different point of view. So, a lot of people, when we tried to discuss this issue and how to move forward with this issue, commented that we just have the same problem if we lived next to an annoying neighbor. And the things that I feel like need to be pointed out that are different in an Airbnb situation versus a annoying neighbor that is just regularly annoying is the regular contact that you get between that person. At least you get to see that person every day. That person is going to at least uphold themselves with a little bit more respect, because they're more worried about having to see you every day and just neighborly interaction, where it's somebody who's just coming and going. They don't care if they upset you because they never have to see you again. We also have the issue that the person who is making money off of this has no reason to restrict who stays there and how they stay there, and because she isn't being reprimanded in any way. Like Jason mentioned, they don't get in any trouble because they have a different person staying there every time. And it's starting to feel like we're her property managers, because there's no one here and we're the one who has to send out the alert when there's a problem. So I really, really urge you to at least tighten up some laws so that we can have a little bit more restriction, and so that we can feel like we have just as much control over our living situation as everyone else does. So that is my piece. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you to both of you for chiming in on this issue that we've been hearing about. I'm going to let you know that we were working on this before the COVID hit, and it was a priority in January and February, and then we had to redirect. So I'm going to have the city manager take your information and contact you, as well as our economic development director, Jordan Twardy. Anything else, city manager, before we move on to the next comment?
Well, thank you, Mayor. Yeah. This mayor and council actually directed this as an ordinance priority for us to study, and we were just getting through the discovery phase, coordinating the meeting the same day that we closed City Hall, and then correct, Mayor, the priority shifted. But we do mean we've stabilized in remote settings, so I think there's no reason why we can't begin to progress forward on this, what's called the short-term rental study. So we are working with police and the economic development director and the city attorney for moving that forward. We recognize it's a priority for the community and council, and I will commit to providing some meaningful progress updates in June.
Just to add on to that, Mayor, if I could, while there was formerly a House bill, and still is a House bill that, if adopted, would preempt some of the city's ability to regulate this issue, that has not been adopted yet. And secondly, the issue associated with nuisance type activities, excessive noise, those are issues that can be enforced, whether it's a temporary customer of a Airbnb or not. And I would certainly encourage somebody who's encountering that type of problem to continue to contact the police department, and I'll circle back with the chief and some of the department personnel to make sure they appreciate that those types of violations can be enforced against the actual occupant. It doesn't have to be issued against the owner of the property.
Excellent. Thank you. So we are on top of this, and council has been hearing, and the mayor has been hearing from residents on this issue, and we are moving forward. So moving on to the next call to audience.
Yep, thank you, Mayor. Annie Galligan, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Welcome, Annie.
Hi, how are you? Ann Galligan, 333 Pearson. I was just looking at the agenda, and one of the things, well, two things. I'm kind of surprised we're hiring an election specialist when the economy's so bad. And number two, I would really hope that I'm looking forward to the city putting something in the agenda for our small businesses of what we can do to help them stay afloat. One of the main reasons why I moved to Ferndale is because of the awesome downtown, and I would hate to see some of these businesses go out of, business. I was thinking some other cities are closing down certain blocks so the restaurants can have very spacious outdoor dining. I don't know if that's a possibility, but I don't, is there any way that the city could look into more of a small, helping out the small businesses during the pandemic, or having some sort of plan to help them out?
Annie,
I don't want to lose our downtown city. That would be very sad to go down there 8 months from now and have all the buildings closed down and just see, So that was my main point today.
Thank you, Annie, for your comments. I encourage you to tune in to Lena Stevens, who is our DDA director and our economic development director. They've been staying on top of this, and our leaders for small cities working with small businesses. So we'll be focusing on that later in the meeting, but I really thank you for your comment and your great concern for our small businesses. Next on the list, Kyle.
Yes, Mayor. So we did have Mike F. raise his hand and then put it down. I assume that's Mike Flores. Mike, I've unmuted you if you do want to make a comment.
Good evening, Mike.
He may be joining us by phone.
All
That's
right.
the last raised hand that I see at this time. So with your permission, I'll move on to the call-ins, and we have 3 call-ins today. So I will just go down the list and see if anybody wants to make a comment. And we will start with 248-3145.
What was the last 4 digits?
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry about that. Is it okay if I speak?
Yeah, please, Mike, it's your turn.
Okay, awesome. Buenas noches, City Council. My name is Augusto Mike Flores on 703 Whittington Street, and I am pro Ferndale. First, I would like to wish all the mothers on council a belated happy Mother's Day. I lost my mother in 2012 at the young age of 56. She was a strong person, passionate about education, equity, and opportunity, like many of you on council. So again, happy Mother's Day to all of y'all. Second, I would like to encourage council in the spirit of transparency to please identify the amounts being requested on each agenda item. This recommendation was adopted for a few city council agendas, but not tonight's agenda. Third, is there a way for Zoom to only show the last 4 digits of your phone number? Several community members with technology barriers have expressed that they don't want to join via phone, exercise their right to speak because of privacy concerns and potential bullying. I can attest to bullying, as I was asked by a community influencer via a post to move out of Ferndale after the last city council meeting. Luckily, I will not be bullied into silence, but as you can imagine, others may not feel the same way. Fourth, has the City Council considered a symbolic gesture of solidarity of a 10% reduction to their stipend compensation during these unprecedented times for our community? And then fifth, my fifth point seems to be important based on what Cobalt just shared with us this evening. Regarding the approved budget from last City Council meeting, can additional clarity be provided around the $2 million general fund loan under the auto parking fund with a 5-year repayment plan with account number 585-000-699.101. When was this line item added, and with what purpose? I'm having difficulty understanding if this loan item was added during the 2019-20 or the 2020-21 budget cycle. I look forward to your review and consideration, and as always, thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you, Mike.
Next, we have area code 734, last four 2212. Go ahead if you'd like to make any comments.
I don't have any comments, Kyle.
All right. And then the third call-in is area code 859, last four 7685. Go ahead if you have any comments. 7685. I'm sorry? Okay, that is everyone who's raised their hand, Mayor, and each of the call-in audience members.
Excellent. All right. So moving on from Cobalt audience, we are moving on to the consent agenda, which I will read. And just as a reminder that 8H and 8J were moved to the regular agenda items C and D. So I will read the consent agenda now, and starting with 8A is the approval of minutes of the regular council virtual meeting held April 27, 2020, as submitted by the city clerk. 8B, approval of the resolution proclaiming May 2020 as Mental Health Awareness Month in the city of Ferndale, as submitted by Mayor Piana. 8C is approval to observe Friday, May 15th, 2020 as Peace Officers Memorial Day and proclaim the week of May 10th, 2020 as National Police Week, as submitted by Police Captain Emmy. 8D, approval of the proclamation designating May 17th through the 23rd as National Public Works Week, as submitted by the city manager. And 8E, approval of the resolution proclaiming June 5th, 2020 as Gun Violence Awareness Day in the city of Ferndale, as submitted by Mayor Piana. And 8F, approval to purchase 11 cases of natural XRT mosquito larvicide for the mosquito abatement program in the amount of $9,893.05 to be charged to the Water Sewer Fund operating supplies, account number 592-000-740, as submitted by the Water Department Supervisor. And 8G, approval of the replacement of a DPW truck in the amount of $48,280.80 with the expense charged to the Water Sewer Fund, capital outlay vehicle purchases, account number 592-000-977-500, as submitted by the DPW Director. 8H, approval of yard services contract with OSHA for $9,000 out of the Community Development Block Grant PY 2018 funds. And then 8I is approval approval to fill the election specialist position. Wait, was that the right one? Yes. Fill the election special position in the city clerk's office as submitted by the city clerk. 8J, request to continue using MCO services for the testing, assessing, interviewing, and promotional ranking of public safety and other municipal positions not to exceed $25,000 through fiscal year 2021, as requested by the Human Resources Director. And 8K, approval of the bills and payrolls as submitted by the city manager's office and subject to review by the Council Finance Committee. What is the pleasure of the council, and would anybody like to read a proclamation today? May and June are pretty popular months. All right. Moving on, can we have a motion from council, please?
Mayor Piana, I would move to approve the items on the consent agenda as amended and as just read by yourself.
Support.
Moved by James and supported by Polika.
Mayor Piana, I do have a, is it appropriate now that we have the motion to make a comment about something on the consent agenda?
Sure, please do.
Okay. I just wanted to know that, well, first, I appreciate the grant that's, the contract that's being offered through OLSA. This is item 8H, I believe it is now. Now, my question is that amount, and I believe I read that only covers so many seniors in this community. And I was just wondering, how are those seniors selected for these services? Because I can tell you at my employment, we get a lot of calls regarding this service, and and with OLSA not really providing these services anymore across the board throughout Oakland County, I was just wondering how the seniors in our community, how are they selected, considering it's just really a fraction of them, like 34 or so, as far as the numbers.
I'm going to have Jordan Forty, our Economic Development Director, if he's available.
Hi, just making sure the mute function worked. Mayor, Council, good evening. Those seniors are selected first come, first serve. And basically, I just for additional context as well, just because it sort of begs the question, Oakland County administers our CDBG funds, Community Development Block Grant. They come from HUD every year. And basically what happens is the county sets a framework around how we can allocate that budget. And they've set a cap for what are called public service activities, of which OLSA and our contract with Haven are. And so we allocate up to the maximum in that category, including the other allocation for emergency services for needy individuals, if you will. So those are the three areas where our public service cap goes, and that sort of sets the budget, and that's why that number is fixed currently. But it's they're first come, first serve.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on some kind of consent agenda items? All right, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaksmay?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes, thank you. That is the consent agenda, and next we are moving on to the regular agenda. And tonight, 9A is consideration of change order number 4 for the DOT project. And I hand this over to our city manager to lead us in this conversation.
Sorry, I forgot. Yeah, the item, this is the item that actually is referring back to the meeting in February. If you recall, at that meeting, I asked for a change order not to exceed $2 million. One portion of that, half of it, $1 million, was to pay for the 4th floor / first floor of the office, was to just advance the ball on that and get that done. And then the second half included costs related to other scope of work that weren't yet finalized, but I have the goal of not exceeding $1 million, hence the not to exceed request. At that meeting, council adjusted my motion request and approved the funding for the 4th floor and requested that I come back with the actual submittals, and that's what this meeting is. So this is the actual follow through from that meeting on February 10th. The total scope of work for change orders that are currently still due have been split into 2. So this is the first, and there will be one more. It still will not exceed $1 million. It's still the same scope of work that I was referring to at that time. However, I did break it up because some of the scope of work is from the winter. And so we have small businesses who are looking for cash flow right now on any account that is due on any construction project that is for work that's been completed. So I decided to break it up, work that they did complete, rather than bringing it all as one and then the scope of work is described in the call to action as well. The first account to be charged would be the Auto Parking Capital Fund account 585-000-977. As I had referenced in the past, if the auto parking fund balance is unable to pay for these change orders to finish out the project, then we would draw upon a loan from the fund balance, which has been budgeted for $2 million, which would be a transfer request from the fund balance. And I think there was a question during call to audience as to what fiscal year that would come out. The fiscal year is concerned about the budget activity. So fiscal 21, which begins July 1st, is when the actual activity of a transfer request would be executed. And so the drawdown of a $2 million loan from the general fund balance to auto parking fund would be executed in fiscal 21, post July 1. However, a term sheet, which would have to be approved by City Council and presented publicly for the record, requesting the transfer, the short intergovernmental fund loan, which is what it's called, would likely happen in June in fiscal 20, but that is just the request. So we would request the information to you. My goal would be to do so in June, prior to the fiscal year. And once that's considered, if it's approved, that would enable us to execute the transferring of funds in the intergovernmental fund loan and to document it and record it for the fiscal 21 post-July 1. I hope that was clear. I know it's a lot of numbers and fiscal years there, but happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions from City Council? If not, we should move
through the mayor.
Yes, please.
If I may. Just to clarify, these are to pay for work that has already been completed.
Correct. This is work that has already been completed. Invoices due. And I didn't see the value in withholding payment for invoices due for small businesses who are looking for cash flow right now.
I just want to make sure because this is bills we have to pay. Otherwise, we're in default. This isn't money we're asking for to pay for something to be done. It's to pay something that has been done.
That's correct. They are related to design changes and construction changes that are described in the call to action packet and detailed in the attachments.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Just for clarity on the point that was brought up earlier in call to audience, the $2 million that we're showing coming from the general fund as a loan to the parking fund, that's money that hasn't been moved. And do we have a reason why it would be $2 million versus $1 million since we had approved $1 million?
Yeah, so the final total is not determined yet. The budget requested for up to $2 million. So the $2 million is the intention would not to exceed $2 million. And I will let the finance director, Cheryl Stubblefield, talk about the concept of pooled cash accounts. Essentially, all of our accounts are pooled to maximize our return on investment for our cash. And as part of our year-end bank reconciliation, we won't really understand where all of our fund balances are for the general fund, for the water fund, for the parking fund, because all those funds are pooled together, which is the best practice for accounting to maximize your ROI, return on investment. Cheryl Stubblefield can actually speak to that, if there's any questions about that policy. We'll give her a second to unmute.
Good evening. Good evening, Council. We pool all of our cash together so that we get a better return on investment, as Joe was saying. The way that it works is as we draw down from the cash fund, which is a pooled cash fund, and pay invoices, when you guys approve the packet for invoices, you approve invoices for the water fund, for the general fund, for forfeiture fund, all of the different funds that we have, and then we have a due to, due from. So the cash shows up in the balance sheet portion of the parking fund and the balance sheet portion of the general fund, and that's where you see the cash moving around. I know it's probably not very clear. It's hard to explain governmental accounting in 45 seconds.
The net of that is it's a pooled cash. So it's not like your checking account, savings account. Everything is not segmented into different accounts, right? The cash is all pooled to maximize our ability to make investments, to make money off of that money. And then at the end of the year, all of those balances are reconciled and then printed and audited by a third-party auditor.
Great, thank you.
Are there any other questions from council? If not, we need a motion from council to proceed.
I move that we authorize the city manager to execute the addenda to the AIA agreement with Colasanti Construction in the amount of $283,769.19 to be charged to the capital funds as assigned below.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May and supported by Councilman Pollica. Is there any further comment from council at this time? If not, I just want to say thank you, Joe, for following through on what you said you were going to do and itemize these change orders for council, as this is a pretty complicated project. And you can see, if you know about value engineering and reducing some costs, that's what has happened here. So thank you for finding some savings along the way. Madam Clerk, can we have roll call on the vote, please?
Councilman Pollica?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes, and that passes unanimously. Thank you. Next on the regular agenda is 9B, is consideration of the purchase agreement for parts of Martin Road Park. And Assistant City Manager Kyle Paulette is going to introduce this item.
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm bringing before you tonight a purchase order which has been drafted by Dan Chris, City Attorney, and the Attorney of Hazel Park Public Schools. And what this purchase order does is consolidates Martin Road Park in the city's name to allow us to proceed to find grant funding and make other improvements to Martin Road Park. The background on this is a short story which I will tell you. So, as I'm sure council is familiar and our residents know, our Parks Department is very invested in finding outside funding for any park improvements that we do. And Martin Road Park was slated for a chunk of the Parks and Roads and Parks bond, which was passed in 2015, to make improvements. Specifically, residents have requested a splash pad to be installed in Martin Road Park. So looking at that process, our Parks and Rec Director, Lorraine Wheeler, applied for a Michigan Department of Natural Resources grant to help defray the costs of making improvements across the park. The MDNR, doing their due diligence, asked the city to present title work for Martin Road Park to prove that we have sole ownership. As far as everybody knew, we did, because it is a Ferndale park and to most people's knowledge always has been. So we went through the work of finding the title, and we're going to present it to the MDNR to find out that the park was actually half owned by the city in a 50% undivided interest, and half owned with Hazel Park Public Schools in a 50% undivided interest. What this means logistically for the city and for the school board just means that everybody has to share the park and get along, which everybody always has and always will. And so because of that camaraderie and friendship, nobody knew that both parties had such a large stake in this property. But the issue that that presents for the city is we're not able to even apply for a lot of outside grants like state grants or federal grants if we can't prove that we're the sole owners, because a lot of these entities, rightfully so, will not provide funds to improve a property that the grantee doesn't own. So once we found out about that, we approached Hazel Park Public Schools and, brought the subject up. They have been nothing but amazing and a great partner throughout this process of negotiating how to proceed forward and provide these park improvements to both Ferndale residents and Hazel Park Public Schools residents, whether they be in Ferndale or just outside of Ferndale on the east side of the city on the west side of Hazel Park. So we got together in February with the superintendent, 2 school board members, along with Mayor Piana and Council Member Leaks May, to sit down and try to figure out what the best way to proceed would be. Before this happened, both parties were interested to understand what the full value of the park was. And so we agreed with Hazel Park Public Schools to share the cost of having a dual appraisal, which would give us both even footing on any kind of negotiation, make it a fair and open process. The appraisers came back saying that the entire park was worth about $100,000, and the appraisal cost the city and the school board $1,600, which we've agreed to split at $800 a piece. So negotiations were quite brief because luckily the mayor and council member understand that although we wish that we could get this consolidation for free, especially during financial times like we're going to be coming up against, it's not fair or right or correct to transfer property without some kind of transfer of money. And so the park is going to be purchased by the city of Ferndale for the price of $49,200, which is half of the fair market appraisal minus the school board's share of the appraisal that we had done. Along with that, we really wanted to make sure that this move wasn't just one-sided and that Ferndale was getting this park once and for all and we could improve it, and then Hazel Park Public Schools families would be cut out. So the mayor and council member agreed with the school board members to create a resolution of sorts that would not only show the friendship and relationship that we want to continue to build with Hazel Park Public Schools, but to make sure that they were included in any future improvements and to sort of honor the fact that that park was partially owned by the school by displaying their school mascot and logo. And so we don't know what that signage is going to look like yet, but we know that we're going to install it. And I have a couple interesting ideas to be discussed later. So this purchase agreement puts forth that process of transferring the title to the city so that we can start looking into investing in the splash pad with the roads and parks bond money, which has been earmarked and can be used to consolidate land, but cannot be used for any other improvements such as updating our community center or any established buildings that we own, only parks. Especially in a time like we're going to be coming into where finances are sort of unknown. Council has already made the wise decision to slow down on some of our discretionary improvements. And I think moving forward on the splash pad, which has an earmarked bond amount set aside to do so, is one area where council can push forward on improving the city and improving the recreational opportunities for residents without cutting into funding that could be spent elsewhere and may very well need to be. So that being said, this purchase agreement would set into effect the purchase, and I believe, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, 30 days after the purchase agreement has been signed, closing will take place, the title will be transferred to the city.
Well, there is still 30 days after the title commitment.
We'll still get a title commitment after the purchase agreement is executed, but a very prompt closing, and certainly the title work has already, this issue has already been looked at in a title commitment, so we don't anticipate any issues associated with getting a title insurance commitment that the city would ultimately pay for prior to the closing. Just 2 points I'd like to add to what Kyle has noted. The portion of the Martin Road Park, it's not the whole park that had this equal undivided interest. It was 3 lots that make up the general property area that is referred to commonly as the Martin Road Park. So it was those 3 parcels that are identified in the purchase agreement that are subject to this purchase agreement. And secondly, the value, that undivided 1/2 interest is further limited by both Hazel Park and the city, that the use of the property has to be for playground and park purposes. And that restriction on the use of the property is going to continue. It will be included in the deed that is transferred at the time of closing. So the utilization of this property, the city couldn't turn around and sell the property. It's restricted to use for playground and park purposes.
Thank you, Kyle, and thank you, Dan, for that overview. Basically, we need to own the land, we need to have a fair deal and compensating for it, and we need land to create the parks we want. So are there any questions from council for the city manager? We need a motion.
Through the chair.
Please, Councilman.
This is actually directed to Dan Christ. So the original agreement came into being like in the 1930s or 1940s, I believe, and since then it was just long since forgotten. My concern is for the future, looking out years past when we're all gone, and let's say that Hazel Park sells their property, their schools. We would obviously get first choice, but if the city turns down purchasing the school's property, if someone else, yep.
I hate to interrupt, Councilman, but this purchase agreement doesn't have anything to do with the school property. It's limited to 3 lots south of their property, which make up what is commonly used right now as the Martin Road Park property. So this purchase agreement only applies to those specific areas. And I can separately, I think we have a survey that we can circulate to council so that they can see what the demarcation of the lots at issue are. But if the school district wished to sell at some point the school property, that would be something the city might be interested in, but it would be a separate transaction, unrelated to that.
Understand that, and that's actually not what I was getting to. I was getting more to if they sold it to a private interest, that agreement of them utilizing the park ends at that point that they sell their property. The new owners would not have the ability to say, oh, since we own this property now and you had this agreement with the schools, well, we have interest now in your park as well to use it as we would like.
They, through the chair, they would not be entitled to such a claim.
Okay.
The ability to utilize the property subject to the purchase agreement would continue for the residents of the city of Ferndale and also to the students of the Hazel Park School District and their family members, but not to anybody else. Again, limited to playground and park purposes.
Okay.
Through the chair, yes. I just wanted to make a comment regarding that day in which we sat down and talked about this negotiation. I thought upon the conclusion of the discussions, it felt really great because it gave a feel that, one, we're finally starting to build relationships with our neighboring school districts or municipalities. I can tell you that the atmosphere in that room was one of new beginning, of working together and working to support one another. So I was very proud and pleased to be a part of it.
Through the chair, I just have some clarifying questions. I want to make sure that I'm conceptualizing everything correctly. So I guess this is directed through the chair, through our attorney, to our attorney, Dan Christ. Correct me if I'm wrong, but there are 3 parcels commonly referred to as Martin Road Park that are adjacent to a Hazel Park School property and the Hazel Park School property is fully owned by the schools, correct?
Yes.
And the 3 parcels commonly known as Martin Road Park, again, it's my understanding that we have a 50% interest in those parcels equal with Hazel Park Schools, and that's not defined by any boundaries. It's not as though our interest is in the west side.
That's correct. It's an unusual conveyance, but it's a 1/2 undivided interest in those properties.
Right. So this purchase agreement isn't for certain parts of that parcel. Instead, this purchase agreement is so that we will have full ownership of those 3 parcels, which we previously only partially owned.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
So the city would own 100% of the 3 lots referred to in the purchase agreement. Again, subject to a limitation on use.
And just to provide, that's a great question. And just to provide some visual context without a visual map here, the parcels that we're talking about is part of the grassy area between the ski mound, the sledding mound, and the sort of flat area between the mound and the school. That's really the properties that we're talking about. There's currently nothing on them. So I hopefully people listening, they find that helpful. Are there any other questions from council? No?
Through the chair, I have just one comment to add, and that is this title work is quite unusual. Actually, it dated back to, I think, 1938, when it was actually just described as Royal Oak Township, and it still was very general in description. But the lesson learned here is that public archiving and records have come a long way since 1938, and it's not necessarily unusual that local government records from that time aren't maintained or accessible. So moving forward with any public facility or public park that is included in the 5-year capital improvement lookout, we will include proactive title search as part of that, just to update the title work moving forward.
Excellent, thank you. All right. If there's no other comments from council, I recommend a motion.
I move to approve the purchase agreement for the parts of Martin Road Park.
I second.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Lakes May and seconded by Councilwoman James. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lakes May?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes, and that item moves
I'm sorry.
unanimously.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Your Honor. Kyle did negotiate and develop a proposed resolution that addressed 2 issues in addition to the purchase agreement, and you already touched on them. They reference the ability of Hazel Park school students to continue to be able to, along with their families, to continue to be able to utilize the properties, and also the issue relative to consulting with the school district regarding future improvements to the property, and that there would be some signage referencing a logo or motto, logo or mascot of the school district.
Thank you, Dan, for bringing that to our attention. That was part of the agreement. So we would need a motion from council to pass this resolution as well.
I'll move to approve the Martin Road Park resolution.
Support.
All right, Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Mikulski? You're on mute.
Laura?
Yes.
Thanks.
Councilman Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Lakes May?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes, and that passes unanimously. And next on the agenda is, let me get back to it, is now 9C, which was moved from the consent agenda. It is the former 8H, which is approval to extend the contract with Davie Resource Group for city forest services for the fiscal year 2020-21 in the amount of $26,000 to be charged to the general fund public services, and authorized of the mayor or city manager to sign the contract. So who will be introducing this or speaking to it?
Hi Council, this is Alexis Richards. I am a project planner with the city. So we are currently seeking approval to extend the contract that we have with Davie Resource Group for their city forestry services. We have Carrie Gray, Davie's senior urban forestry consultant, on with us tonight, and if council would like, she can go through the presentation that was included within the agenda packet, and is also available for any questions. And then additionally, myself and DPW Deputy Director Dan Antosik are also available to answer any questions that you guys may have.
Thank you for offering that. I'm going to request Councilwoman Mikulski with her questions, as she is the council person who requested this be pulled into the regular agenda. And if there's any questions of fact at this point that you would like to pose to city staff.
So I brought this up and wanted to move it to a regular agenda, mainly because I remember visiting this issue back in September of 2019. Overall, the cost is competitive. So we know that we're getting an ISA certified arborist. That's about, I want to say about $60,000 per year as far as salary goes. We're getting that for less than half the cost. So in general, I don't have an issue with the cost per se. It's about $2,000 per month, or about $1,500 per contractual visit. I am a little bit disappointed to see that the cost has increased. So the quote has gone up by $5,000 for these support services since the last quote back in 2019. And I wanted to touch on this because in going back through all of the different paperwork that we have, which, I mean, we have a 74-page, if I can manage to pull it out here, we have a 74-page tree assessment from Davie and tree management plan back from November of 2018. And I thank Dan and Alexis both for speaking to me this morning about what Davie does, and I do think that they're a valuable resource. However, with us having this plan and looking through everything that we've done with Davie in the past, I can't help but question if we need to continue this contract. And I wanted to actually point out that back in September of 2019, so that was the September 23rd council meeting, Raylon had brought up a really fantastic point. She had explored council and I believe Aaron to explore options, keep track of the work that DRG was doing, and require regular updates. Now, I don't think that we've seen a regular update. It looks like the suggestion was for updates every 3 to 6 months. We're now past the 6-month mark. Again, I haven't seen anything. Maybe there's an update that's in the background that I personally haven't seen. But in general, I think it's necessary to really maintain a critical eye at this time, because this is an ongoing contract and because there's a request to potentially extend this beyond just this year. So if Carrie would like to speak a little bit about what all goes into our Davie Resource contract, I would really appreciate that.
Is that a
Hey, Kyle, I think you need to unmute Carrie. She is probably in the audience, or well, she is in the audience. One thing that I can touch on real quick, Laura, is that we have our quarterly meeting tomorrow, so you can expect an update from us after that. But I'll let Carrie answer your other questions.
Hi, good evening. Can you guys hear me?
Yes. Welcome.
Thanks. So thanks again for having us tonight. So I am Carrie Gray. I'm with Davie Resource Group. So we are the urban forestry consultants for the city of Ferndale. So we provided a presentation that sort of documented the work that we've done with the city. So we did do the management plan in 2018, like as a support to the inventory that was completed at the same time. And that provided recommendations for you guys to prioritize your tree management activities. But the services that Davie Resource Group provides you now is each month we have monthly visits. And so you guys receive service requests from residents. And so our ISA certified arborists come out and look at the trees and assess it, because the knowledge base of some of your staff isn't at the level of ISA certified arborists to be able to assess those trees and make sure that there's any risks or maintenance or management needs that need to be addressed immediately. So that's one of the opportunities that our staff provides. We also take a critical view of your data and information. So for instance, our staff this month is looking at tree planting sites. So you had an urban tree canopy assessment completed in 2016. So our staff is looking at prioritized planting areas. So those are areas that are high priority for planting based on the amount of canopy cover. So those are some of the things that we're able to provide by looking and utilizing the tools that have been provided to the city in order to provide the best services to the city. And there's one other thing. So you mentioned that the difference in cost. The last contract that came through in September was only for 9 months, and this contract is for 12. So that's where the difference in pricing comes from. That's why it seems like there's a difference, but it was a 9-month contract from the previous one.
Great.
So we're trying to get you guys onto a fiscal year cycle instead of, we were off on the fiscal year. So we wanted, last year, Aaron wanted to get us on the fiscal year with you guys. But we do also utilize, we have technical expertise with our Davie Institute. So that's our research wing. So last year, staff contacted us because you guys were losing a lot of oak trees in Geary Park. They were just failing and breaking. So we're able to utilize our staff at the Davie Institute to come out and assess those trees. And then we provided recommendations to manage those trees in the park. So we pretty much, we provide those monthly site visits, and then we provide additional services as you guys need them throughout the year.
Great. I did want to point out one other thing just for everybody involved here. In speaking earlier this morning, and again, thank you for the follow-up, Joe. You sent me an email saying that there is a certain amount of portability to the tree survey, as well as all the data within Tree Keeper, I believe. So if we did decide that we wanted to move away from Davie, we could port that data to a different platform and still manage our trees within that platform. Beyond that, I wanted to point out again that in September, at the September 23rd meeting, it was brought up that we should investigate what Pleasant Ridge is doing right, since their canopy is rightly cherished and it's prioritized and seemingly healthy. I did speak to their city manager, and I wanted to point out that they don't have a DPW team the way that we do. However, they do also have their 16-page tree manual, and they've created an internal guide for tree selection, assessing current risks and reducing those risks, as well as they have their own tree inventory. So they maintain their database. It's basically an Excel spreadsheet. When they need to have trees assessed, they actually call Davie Tree Services rather than have a contract with Davie Resource Group. And Davie Tree Services in their contract comes out and assesses the tree and then potentially does the service for them. So again, they don't have a DPW, we do. I know we're a different beast. So they're a much smaller city. We have a lot more ground to cover. I'm not sure what the capability would be to match that sort of service level that they have within Pleasant Ridge as they use Davie Tree Services versus us using our own DPW. But again, it was just another thing that was pointed out back in September of 2019 that I'm sort of doing my due diligence and following up on. And beyond that, I also wanted to touch on the fact that at our January 13th meeting in the sustainability report, and I apologize if there's lots of clattering in the background, there are animals that are making sounds here. At the January 13th meeting in our sustainability report, it was noted that we have 110 of the 400 trees that were planted last year, 110 of them were actually planted by volunteers. That's over a quarter. And just with that in mind, I think it begs us to revisit our community forestry program. I know that we had, again, touched on that back in 2019, and I haven't really heard much about it since then, and I haven't seen it sort of pushed within the public. Again, I'd like to see us start leveraging these sorts of resources and engaging the members of our community so that potentially going forward, we might not have to engage with outside contractors to do any of this regular maintenance and assessment that continues to go on seemingly indefinitely.
Are there any other questions from council or a comment?
I do have excuse me. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I do have a comment. I think I heard that there is a planned meeting tomorrow to kind of go over to update what's been going on regarding our tree planting and our arborists and our partnership. My question is, how soon would council get access to the outcome of that meeting, and if it could be before the next council meeting, if possible?
Yeah. Hi, it's Alexis again. So I misspoke. Our meeting is on Thursday, not tomorrow. I forget it's Monday. But given that, I can definitely have an outline and minutes from our meeting to you guys before the next council meeting. That won't be an issue at all.
So not just an outline, I just wanted kind of a detailed
Right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, hi, this is Dan over at the DPW Mayor and Council. We did note that council requested regular meetings and stuff like that with Davie, our contractor for our tree services, and we have been having those meetings internally. We have them monthly and quarterly with Davie staff to talk about everything that we do in regards to our urban canopy here in the city of Ferndale, maintenance activities, training, upcoming needs that we may need. And since I've been here with the city for the last 2.5 years, nothing but a positive experience in working with Davie Tree, and that goes for myself and all of our staff. And I think Aaron's not here, but I can speak on behalf of Aaron Cattell, our sustainability planner, as to a really positive experience that we've been having with Davie over the course of our doing business together since they started in on our overall tree assessment back in 2016.
Through the chair, I would just add that I heard City Council request regular public reports as there's a public interest in the canopy study and activities from DRG, and I think we'd be happy to commit to a public report out at the very minimum around the tree planting seasons, which typically are spring and fall, and we will work with the contractor to memorialize that.
And I do have some more requests on top of that, and I think Laura's brought up some, or Councilwoman Mikulski's brought up some really good points. And I think a lot of those conversations should be done in our strategic planning. And I am interested in the report from Davie has always been 30% tree cover And that was from 4 years ago when we started the tree cover analysis. And so I wanted to know what percentage we are increasing annually our tree cover and if we have a target. So our urban forestry programs in urban areas, it is one, planting more trees is a number one strategy from an urban area on reducing its impact on the climate. And so it is a way for a city to control reducing greenhouse gas emissions. And I think we need to work with our climate consultant who we hire to do the greenhouse gas assessment for the city and moving towards a climate action plan, is how our tree cover is actually achieving, helping the city achieve those goals. And so I am looking for the appropriate tools that will help us get there, and whether or not DPW or an external service consultancy is able to help us report on that annually to reach our carbon neutral goals, when I'm hoping that we'll set with the appropriate data in early 2021. And I just want to remind everybody that our program is modeled off of the city of Ypsilanti, and they have clear greenhouse gas targets that they set in 2012 on their urban forestry, and they were doing a 6.31% increase in trees of a 2020 target. We'll have to ask them if they've actually met that. And that was in a climate action plan that was created for them. So with that, we need a motion from council. To approve this contract with the recommendation that we look at this further as a strategic planning process.
And just for clarity, this is only committing us to fiscal year 2020 and 2021. Is that correct?
Correct.
I move to approve the contract extension with Davie Resource Group for city forestry services for the fiscal year 2020 to 2021 in the amount of $26,000 to be charged to the general fund public service contractual services account number listed in our packet, and authorize the mayor and city manager to sign the contract as submitted by the CED project planner.
Support.
Moved by Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May and supported by Councilman Polika. Madam Clerk, can we have roll vote, please?
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Polika?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. That passes unanimously. And moving on to our last regular agenda item, moved from the consent agenda, which is approval of TSP services bid proposal for the Geary Skate Park Sustainability Project and award of the contract in the amount of $40,150. And acceptance of the Giffords-Webster proposal of construction management services in the amount of $5,370. And who is introducing this?
Through the chair, the Parks and Recreation Director, Lorraine Wheeler, will introduce this.
Good evening, Council. Yes, so as part of our ask during the March 27 Council meeting,
we were asking for a larger park improvement project that included Geary and Wanda Park. That was placed on hold for now due to what we're going through with COVID-19 and the potential impacts that it may have on the capital projects and our budgets in the future. We did receive several grant funding to fund portions of that project, one of them being the Tony Hawk Foundation Built to Play Green Sustainability Skate Park grant in the amount of $50,000. So what we're asking today is to just pull out that portion of the project to complete it so we can utilize the grant funds, which covers majority of the project except for $5,000, 100, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to pull it back up. $5,000, $370. So we received grant funding again from the Tony Hawk Foundation in the amount of $50,000. American and Bloom grant, we'll be utilizing $12,000 of that grant, bringing our total grants to $62,000. With the total project being $67,370, and the impact to the general fund or cost after grants will net $5,370.
Through the chair, if I may just add on one final comment. I want to credit Lorena for working through the numbers that were concerned about fiscal constraints, clearly, with the unknowns in the economy right now. There were also comments that talked about the importance of maintaining public park investments and not leaving grant money on the table. So I just really want to credit Lorena for really compartmentalizing the big projects into this small bite-sized piece and looked at what we could do to not leave that grant money on the table. So credit to Lorena for that.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. I'm going to invite Councilwoman Mikulski. She's the one who requested that this be relocated to the regular agenda to ask her questions of city staff.
Could you talk a little bit about some of the importance of these improvements? For instance, some of the sustainable elements?
Sure. So some of the additional sustainable elements that this project will cover are retaining walls that will be added to our skate park, which will help with the stormwater runoff and soil erosion. In addition to that, we are installing a bioswale, and that will also assist with managing stormwater runoff and absorbing that water as opposed to it going directly into our storm drains. We'll be installing amenities such as recycling bins around the skate park to encourage people to recycle as opposed to just throwing it in the regular trash or throwing it on the ground, of course.
Great.
So, yeah.
Are there any other questions from council?
Through the chair, I have a couple of questions. One, following up on what you just described, Lorena, for folks who don't follow sort of eco-construction jargon, can you describe what a bioswale is?
Sure. So with the bioswale we're building, we're using native plants and natural landscaping to filter rainwater into the bioswale and away from our hard surfaces such as sidewalks and in the skate park. So the water will drain into the bioswale, which will be retained and then slowly leached into the ground as opposed to running off of the sidewalk into the street, into our storm drain and impacting our storm drain more than what is already needs to be impacted. So we'll be using trees and natural plantings for the bioswale.
And if we did not proceed with this project, would that section continue to be concrete or some other surface?
Well, currently the section for the bioswale is already in place. It was part of the original planning of the skate park. So if you were to look at the skate park, you will see an area now that's basically has a few trees since we started the process, and then the rest is dirt. So if we don't proceed, then it will remain as is.
Gotcha. My other question is, are these the grants that have been approved, are these reimbursement grants so that the city puts up the cost, it pays the invoice and gets reimbursed on the back end?
Great question. So we're working with the American and Bloom grant for this project and the Tony Hawk grant. The Tony Hawk grant, we've already received and deposited those funds, so we have that on hand, and that's an amount of $50,000. The American and Bloom grant is a reimbursable grant. So after we complete the project, I'll be submitting the final report and all the supporting documentations to get our reimbursement, and that'll be up to $12,000.
Thank you.
Just one final question. Do we have a grand total on what we've spent or what we're planning on spending on the skate park?
Well, what we spent on the skate park was just shy of, $500,000 is what we spent on the skate park to build it itself.
Lorena, can you clarify? The city didn't spend a total of $500,000. Half of that was in grants.
Yep. Yes. So to clarify, we received $250,000 in grant funding from the Tony Hawk Foundation to build the skate park, in which we matched with an additional $250,000. So $250 from the city and $250 from the Tony Hawk Foundation. Built to play.
Great. Thank you.
Those are really good questions. And I just wanted to say council was pretty clear when we had to make the hard decision of foregoing investing fully in Geary Park as well as Wanda Park, the total amount that we had planned, that we really wanted to make sure we didn't leave any grant money off on the table. So I really appreciate you working hard, like our city manager has said. So thank you. With that, I encourage the council to consider a motion at this time.
I motion to approve the bid recommendation and award the contract to TSP Services, Inc. for the Geary Skate Park Sustainability Project, limited to alternative G5, only in the amount of $40,150, and accept Giffel Webster's proposal for construction management services in the amount of $5,370 charged to the general fund City Park. Capital outlay account number 101-750-977-000, and execute the contract by the mayor or city manager, subject to the contractor TSP submitting insurance certificates and bonds prior to commencement of any work on the project. Looks like there's two motions.
There is.
Okay.
Okay, well, let's take the first motion and do that one that Councilman Polka just read. Is there support for this motion?
I'll support.
I'm going with Councilwoman Mikulski as the support. And can we have roll call, Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Polka?
Yes.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. And for the next motion?
I motion to approve DPW in concert with the Parks and Recreation Department to purchase and install amenities and landscaping necessary for grant compliance as listed in the amount not to exceed $21,850, charged to General Fund City Parks Capital Outlay account number 101-750-977.000.
Support.
I'm not clear on who said that. Okay, that was supported by Councilwoman Mikulski. Madam Clerk, please.
Councilmember James?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May?
Yes.
Councilmember Mikulski?
Yes.
Councilmember Polka?
Yes.
And Mayor Piana?
Yes. And that concludes our regular agenda this evening. And then now we will move on to call to council. And the lucky winner to kick us off tonight is I'm going to start with DPW.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So, I'm sure most of you have had the chance to observe we are in beginning full swing of construction season. So, at this point, our cured in place sewer lining contractor has been working. They've been working for about a month now. Last week, we kicked off construction on the 2020 paving program and the 2020 water main program. Last week we did not start on water main. We started on some sewer main improvements that we had to get going. But this past week we started construction on Pearson, Withington, West Lewiston, and Vestor for the paving program. So we do apologize for any inconveniences that we've caused anyone. Also, we do, with the pandemic and stuff like that going on, all of our contractors, all their subcontractors do have COVID-19 field operations plans in place for best practices, screening employees, social distancing, cleaning of tools, disinfecting equipment, vehicles, and things of that nature, that they're doing their best to observe during this time. The one nice thing about the nature of the work that they do and what we do is that PPE is an everyday occurrence, and that, granted, you don't always have to wear a mask while working within 6 feet of someone. Respirators, gloves, cleaning equipment and stuff like that, along with other safety procedures, are just the nature of the work. So I don't think that the adjustment is going to be that bad or a tough pill to swallow, for lack of better words. So we're adjusting all to it very pretty good. And thus far, the first week of paving and water main have gone quite well, knock on wood. We hope that continues. We will see. And I do want to touch on Kara updated a section of our website for all of our residents to go and see kind of basically some frequently asked questions, along with the list of streets that we'll be paving. So if you do go to the main page of our website, homepage, and you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see the GIS map of the 2020 paving program. And then to the right of that, you'll also see a box for roads and streets that you can click on, and that'll give you details about what the contractor is required to do if your driveway is going to get closed, and the 72-hour notices that they give before they proceed with work. This is our first year working with Cadillac Asphalt. They are paving contractors. So far, so good. We're hoping it continues that way. And then you probably have seen that we have started mowing grass in the parks. So it looks like maybe next week, spring/summer, will join us. So it'll basically be business as usual for what we got going on in the DPW. And as always during this time, while our offices are closed to the public, we are answering our phones, we are answering our emails for any questions or concerns that any of our residents may have. And that's what I got for this evening.
Through the chair, can I ask a few questions?
Please do.
First, on behalf of the residents of Vestor, I accept your apologies for the inconvenience. But on a serious note, I did want to thank the communications department for providing some information on the website, because as is typical of probably a lot of households, we received the mailing from the city as well as a flyer from the contractor, which, both promptly disappeared. So having that available electronically was really helpful to share with neighbors on our neighborhood page. But one concern has come up that I personally and some of my neighbors have also observed some of the contract employees not observing social distancing. I have not seen it happen in connection to contacts with residents, but with each other, we've seen folks working very closely side by side without any kind of gear, passing things back and forth. And, you know, no one wants to be a jerk about it. We're really just concerned about everyone's health and welfare and making sure that the folks who are working for us are staying safe. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention and let you know that it is still a concern, and any influence that we can do, use to promote health and safety standards for folks working within the city, anything we can do to support that, I would encourage.
Oh, and we will definitely have a conversation about that. Our contractors have the ability to sign off on a plan that we have in place or submit their own plan for their COVID-19 field operations. So if they have folks out in the field that are not observing what their plan is in place, that's a conversation that we need to have with their on-site foreman, project manager, and so on. Because we do take that seriously, and whether they're interacting with a resident or just interacting between each other and working in close quarters, it is very difficult at times to do some of the nature of that work without getting in someone else's personal space, but we still need to be making sure that we're observing all the best practices related to protecting everyone in regards to COVID-19. And then one more point that I did want to touch on. During this time, a lot of the stuff that we do requires the use of water, and we'll pull water from fire hydrants. And at times, that can stir up sediment in the system. So depending on where we're working at within the city, some residents may be experiencing brown water. If you are, it's not an issue with our water quality. It's just because we're stirring up some sediment in the system. So please run your cold water for a few minutes until that discoloration goes away. We always recommend on running your cold water from the nearest tap to your water meter. So if you have a laundry tub in the basement, run your cold water at that tap instead of doing it in your upstairs bathroom or something like that.
I just wanted to echo Councilwoman James' comments. My street is also being repaved, and I've witnessed some workers having their masks pulled below their chin. And I'm also very compassionate towards these protocols and businesses learning and training on our environment as we get back to work. And every business is going about it slightly differently. I'm hearing it from our small businesses as well, of how do we do this and how do we maintain it and how do we enforce. And while we're all concerned and want everybody to follow the rules, have some patience with city staff as they work with these companies, because everybody is going through this at the same time and learning. And sometimes I think habits and personal behavior, we revert back to what we've known as we are performing our jobs in the field sometimes, and need to be redirected and mindful going back to wearing the protocols. And I also know that doing hard work, wearing a mask is also very restrictive. And so it's something to get used to, and not everybody is comfortable in that environment for 8 hours a day working and doing hard work. And that's not giving excuses. I'm trying to accommodate human behavior and moving from what we know to doing all these new rule changes to protect everybody. We say don't touch your face, and we all touch our face. So it's just, I'm trying to be very mindful of it. But if you do see where protocols aren't being followed, we do encourage you to call DPW to show or voice where this is not being upheld with any construction worker, DPW, city, or someone working on behalf of the city. So thank you, Dan, for doing DPW tonight. Next, we'll go to our fire chief.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
All right. I have a few announcements. One, I can't introduce him right now, but we hired another firefighter. His name is John Marino. He came to us from Fraser. He served 10 years there as a volunteer firefighter, and then he was in Centerline for 2 years as a volunteer firefighter. We're happy to have him. He's finishing out his paramedic program. He should be done by August of this year. And we're just filling the few vacancies that we have. So we're really happy to have John on the team. Next, I'd like to go into some of the free testing sites that Oakland County and even Wayne County have for residents. I know we talked about this at the last council meeting, but over on Greenfield at 27725 Greenfield, that would be the Oakland County Health Department. They offer free COVID-19 testing Mondays and Wednesdays from 9 to 5. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, if you want to go out to Telegraph, 1200 Telegraph, that's at the county building. They offer it out there. I know that's a little farther. And then also out in Novi at the Civic Center, they offer it as well on Fridays. And that's on West 10 Mile in Novi. You have to call for an appointment. When you show up, you'll stay in your car. They ask that you do not take any pets. So I'm giving Marnie a heads up not to take her cats. All right. And then you can call the number. It's 1-800-848-5533. And all of this information is on the oakgov.com website. Hit the COVID link, and then you'll see some more prompts to drive-through testing and some other information on COVID. Also, our neighbors in Wayne County are offering it for Wayne, Oakland, and Macomb County residents. And that's Monday through Sunday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. It's at the State Fairgrounds. So if you go to State Fair Road, which is roughly 7.5 mile in Woodward, you'll head east till you get to a street called Bowman. It's probably, looking on the map, maybe between 1/4 and 1/2 mile. And then you enter through the south side of the State Fairgrounds. That place requires a doctor's note unless you are a first responder. So Oakland County does not. You just make a phone call, make an appointment. But if you have to go to Wayne County, you'll need a note or a prescription from your doctor, I believe. And that's on the website as well. Other than that, I just want to remind people, I know the weather was kind of cold this weekend, but we still went out and barbecued for Mother's Day. Try and keep your barbecues 15 feet away from your house, your garage, any structure that can burn, including a deck. We do have occasional fires from barbecues, whether they're propane or charcoal. And also, since people are quarantined, it's never a better time to practice and plan an escape plan with your family and check your smoke alarms. And if you need assistance with your smoke alarms, you can go on the website, the Ferndale website, and go to the fire department tab, or you can call headquarters and we can assist people with smoke alarms. That's all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Moving on to police. Chief Palazzolo, thanks for joining us tonight.
Evening, Mayor and Council. I want to start off by thanking a couple of repeat donors. The first one is VFW Post 1407. They have provided lunch for both shifts on every Wednesday, and they continue to do that for another month. So the men and women are appreciative of those lunches. Detroit Axle donated another 6,000 surgical masks to the PD. They just called us and asked us if we needed some. I think they donated some to the fire too. I wanted to personally thank them. You mentioned the resolution on the consent agenda that it is Police Week, and May 15th, this Friday, is officially Police Day or Police Memorial Day. For the last 24 years of my career here, we have had a ceremony on the front lawn of the City Hall complex honoring our fallen brothers and sisters. Obviously, this year it's going to be a little bit different, but last year there was 146 officers who lost their lives in the line of duty. These individuals all had mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, husbands, wives, and kids who are still living with the memory of their lost loved one. The National Police Memorial, which is located in Washington, D.C., honors all members of law enforcement that have made the ultimate sacrifice. I'd like to talk a little bit about the park and what it offers. The park honors all members. Like I said, the park sits on 3 acres in Washington, D.C. and contains the names of 24,221 names carved into 608 feet of blue and gray marbled walls. The remembrance walkways are guarded by bronze statues of adult lions guarding their cubs. It is symbolic of strength, courage, and valor for those who live the life of a guardian. The city of Washington, D.C. is illuminated by blue lights and candlelight vigils throughout the week. On Friday, the communications department is going to release some type of slideshow with pictures of the memorial showing all the things that I just talked about. I encourage you to take a minute out of your day and watch for that presentation and thank the men and women who go out every day, just like every other first responder, and just say thank you. That is all I have.
Thank you, Chief. Next, I'm going to ask the Community and Economic Development Department.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. I just wanted to highlight a couple things, and mostly couched in thank yous. First to Commissioner Helene Zach for giving a high level on the grants that Oakland County had provided for our businesses. And I just wanted to give a couple sort of more finer detail numbers on those grants. The city of Ferndale, in 2 rounds of funding, gave about $244,000 to 68 businesses. Those awards were all $3,500 a piece, except for one, which Helene had mentioned. I'll refrain from naming any of the others until the county releases the official list, but since Helene mentioned the Rust Belt, I wanted to just kind of emphasize that one because that was an interesting case. Because if those who remember the way round 1 went, 85% of the funding was given based on the number of eligible applicants, but 15% was reserved for the municipality teams that were part of the district to decide collectively to disperse them. For example, in round 1, we gave extra awards to Royal Oak Township because based on the numbers, they were a much smaller share of the pie, and we wanted to make sure they were represented. Well, an interesting story about the Rust Belt was all of the peer cities in our group, which was Hazel Park, Oak Park, Pleasant Ridge, us, of course, and Royal Oak Township, because of the regional significance of Rust Belt as a incubator for micro businesses. We're not talking about small businesses with dozens and hundreds of employees. We're talking about folks that are just trying to get off on their own. The other cities collectively agreed that Rust Belt needed more to sustain as that incubator, and so they were given a $10,000 grant from that 15% share. And so that was just a really special moment where these cities had an opportunity to grab money, extra money for themselves, but they wanted to take care of a regional destination. And so that was a very special, if gut-wrenching process to be part of. We were very pleased and grateful that Oakland County and Dave Coulter and his team and the commission were able to bring that resource to us. But I also wanted to point out, as someone had mentioned way back at the call to audience, about some local stuff that we're going to be doing. And the other thank you I wanted to give was to this council for approving $100,000 for business support. And so I've been doing research with our business community. I've been talking to stakeholders at the chamber and the DDA, and additionally working with Lena Stevens of the DDA and Joy Wells of the chamber, who also I just want to give a quick shout out and thanks. We're part of that grant team, and without whom we would not have been as effective as a team. So we have some really great stars in those organizations, and we're lucky to have them at our side. But they will also be helping me in developing a proposal that we'll be submitting to you for the next council meeting for an initial proposal about how to deploy those funds for your review and consideration and input. Before we do anything with it, we obviously want to make sure that the funding you approved goes where you think it should. So we'll be giving you an initial proposal for the Open and Ferndale funding for small business support. And so that $100,000 will be aimed directly at providing additional relief to our small business community in COVID-19. And it's going to acknowledge the fact that as this pandemic has gone on for what seems at times to be a time frame that's hard to measure as days bleed together, but as the pandemic has unfolded and needs have changed and priorities have shifted among our small businesses, what we want to do is be adaptive to that changing circumstance with our business community. And so I just wanted to give a heads up, since that came up at Call to Audience, that we will be presenting that at next council meeting with the goal of getting your input on how you want to see those funds go, but providing some useful context and recommendations.
Thank you for that update.
Next, why don't we go on to Parks and Rec? Lorena?
Hi, good evening again. A few updates. As you guys probably seen, it was mentioned or publicized that our park programming as well as the Kulik Center has been canceled for the remainder of the summer. And our parks continue to remain, our park amenities continue to remain closed, such as the skate park, play structures, basketball courts, and other program fields. Our dog park will also be closed for now until the end of the summer, as currently was planned. Our sports programming has also been canceled throughout the summer, which goes through Labor Day. We also are in the process of issuing refunds for those programs that were canceled. So we just ask for the community's patience, because there is a new refund process that we're going through on that. And with the restructuring of our department, and it just takes a little more time. So we will get those out. If you have any questions, you can feel free to email us or call us at any time. A few things that we're continuing. We are still doing our bi-weekly Gleaners groceries distribution through the Kulik Center. And that will be this Tuesday. So tomorrow from 2:30 to 5:30, and every other Tuesday from tomorrow all the way through the end of June. Same day, same time. We are continuing our YMCA meal giveaway as well on Mondays and Fridays at 3:45 to 4:15. They're only there for 30 minutes. So if you are in need of a meal, please get there promptly. And again, they will be there this Friday and then the following week, Monday and Friday, and so on. If you need updates on or reminders on when these days and times are for Gleaners and our YMCA distributions, you can check out our Facebook page, and all the information is there under our events. We are continuing our SMART service as well as Meals on Wheels. So if you need a ride anywhere for any resident in Ferndale to an essential service such as a grocery store or pharmacy or doctor, you can still make an appointment to have a pickup directly from your house and take you to where you need to go. We are requiring now that everybody wear a mask or some type of face covering before you enter the bus. There will be questions asked prior to you getting your appointment, just to make sure you are healthy and keeping everybody safe as we ride as you utilize our SMART bus. We recently put out a survey, a spring park and recreation survey, and within hours of putting it out, we got an overwhelming response so far. We submitted that. I know there's a lot of different surveys going around in the city, so not to saturate everybody with surveys, we only submitted those surveys to participants of our programs who we have in our system. And so far, within a day, basically, we got almost 300 responses. We were able to evaluate 100 of those responses so far, and we got some good information about how our community is currently thinking about re-engaging with Parks and Recreation and our parks. Just a few snapshots of that survey. We asked what were the comfort level for them to return to Kulik and to utilize our programming. And mostly what we're hearing is when non-essential businesses open, such as gyms, they would be more comfortable to come back to Coolidge. We asked what are some of the most important programs that or that they deem most important, which was our youth sports at number 1, youth classes, and then group exercises coming in at number 3. And we asked them, how do we meet your recreation needs? We've been doing a lot of outreach and different activities through Facebook and virtually. And we wanted to know, what are we missing, or how can we meet your needs now? And some of the responses were virtual programming and activities, which we'll look to do this, more of this later in the summer when we have more resources. And then we also asked some park questions, such as how are you utilizing the parks, or do you utilize our parks? And in general, we have 96% of the respondents that we evaluated are currently utilizing our parks, which is great to hear. Of course, we are promoting social distancing practices and being safe in doing so. But these surveys just kind of give us a pulse check on what's happening in the community, in the Parks and Rec world. I just want to give a shout out to all of our participants that we've had throughout the years in our programming. We've been getting a lot of positive responses and outreach efforts from them since the announcement of the programming being canceled. So I just want to thank everybody who supports our department and what we're doing, and we'll continue to work hard for you and provide programming as we all get through this together. Lastly, we held our first virtual park meeting, which was on May 6th. It went very well, and I just want to announce anybody that's interested in attending. Our next meeting as of now is scheduled for July 1st, which is our meetings are the first Wednesday of the month. And so again, we won't be having a meeting in June, but we'll have one in July, and the first Wednesday is July 1st, and that will be at 6:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, Lorena. I know on behalf of myself, and I'll speak for council, that canceling our programming was a really heartbreaking decision. And just want to remind people that cities are making these decisions from the directive of Oakland County and the state. As soon as they lift these executive orders, the city will lift ours too, and reopen the play equipment, dog park, skate park, as soon as we are able to from the county and the state. All right, moving on. I'm going to go to communications.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I have, it's the time of year basically where there's a lot of information, right? Spring programming, despite COVID and all of the circumstances we're in right now, there's a lot of requests for information. There's a lot of programming starting. And so I just wanted to do a quick review. There's also been a lot talked about in this meeting tonight. So for anybody who's interested in grass and weeds information, the ordinance for grass and weeds starts May 1st. We're doing a delayed enforcement year this year, obviously. I don't think we'll be enforcing until June. However, warnings might get sent out in May, depending on what the circumstances look like. So we've got all the information residents need about grass and weeds, as well as a really cool program that our community and economic development team is doing called Stay Home Spruce Up, featuring everybody's favorite face of grass and weeds, Colin. And so we're encouraging residents and business owners to, without going out, without visiting the store, do any kind of landscaping, updating, planting, gardening, cleaning that they can do. And the Beautification Commission will be voting on a winner. Winners will receive either a $100 or $50 gift card that we encourage them to spend in downtown. So very exciting, cool thing. We've got information about that. All of that is on the homepage of ferndalemi.gov. We have an article about the Parks and Recreation programming for the summer, exactly what is open, exactly what is closed, and exactly how long we're looking for. as well as an article all about the Gleaners food delivery with all of the dates and location information. That's also on ferndalemi.gov, right on the top part of the homepage. We have, as Dan Antosik mentioned earlier, a section of the website now devoted to all of the road work going on this summer. We've got a pretty extensive FAQ in there and opportunity for residents to be able to ask questions if they have additional questions to throw at us. That also can be found on the homepage or more directly at ferndalemi.gov/resources/roads-streets. We had a change order for the DOT on tonight's agenda. There's an article all about that on parkferndale.com, also on ferndale.com, as well as all the other information about openings and closings and construction and ongoings relating to the DOT. So anybody who's interested can find that there. And as I'm sure our city clerk will mention when she speaks, we have a new process going forward for boards and commissions. We heard her present about it, I believe, at the last meeting. And I just wanted to remind everybody that open boards and commissions positions are currently posted on the city's website as well as on all of the city's social media. We would encourage anybody who's interested in learning more about those boards and commissions or interested in potentially serving on one of them to visit the homepage, which will direct you to our new online portal. Makes all of that information much easier to find, much easier to access and engage with, much more transparency in that process. And that will be open until the 15th, which is the end of this week. And then we will forward any applications we receive to the mayor for consideration at the next council meeting. I think that's most of what we covered tonight. We joke around, the communications department, especially in the spring and the fall, is like the city's slow release catch basins on sewers. We're just trying to drip the information out slowly enough that everybody's able to see it and it's not going out too fast, but fast enough that we're able to keep up with what all's coming in. So lots of great stuff coming from all of our departments. And if anybody has questions about it, you can probably find it on our homepage, or if not, you can reach out to me and we can get you the information you need. That's it.
Thank you.
Chair, can I make an inquiry?
Yes, absolutely.
Kara, thank you very much for all the work that you guys are doing. And again, I'll echo thank you for the road construction information. I know my neighbors found that helpful. When the fire chief was giving his update earlier, he listed a number of places that Oakland County residents can go for COVID testing. I wonder if this might be a rhetorical question if you don't have it at hand, but if you do know of a good consolidated list like the fire chief listed that's available online, can we make that easily accessible?
We absolutely can. And actually, we have a website. Well, we have a section of the city's website, ferndalemi.gov/COVID. And we have a page on there called resources. And as we get information about where people are able to find testing sites, as well as a lot of other different information, we're posting it there. So I will make sure I reshare that to our community. It hasn't been shared in a few weeks, and remind them of the updates that are coming into that site.
Great, thank you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. Next, we are going to go to the city clerk.
Thank you. Good evening. First off, I would like to thank Council for approving the election specialist position that was included in tonight's consent agenda. This position is going to be really important for us moving forward as we focus on changing demands. It's like day-to-day watching the Bureau of Elections and Secretary of State to see how our next few elections are going to play out. Are we going to move to a primarily mail-only election with very few precincts? Will it be normal? Whatever it will be, this position is going to be a huge part of our core service excellence that we strive to provide for all of our voters. And speaking of elections, we have our absentee ballot application mailing has been sent to PSI, our printing vendor in Taylor, and they will be sending out our apps before the end of the month. Another reminder for the permanent absentee voter list, anyone who's interested in getting signed up to receive automatic applications prior to every election can do so by selecting elections under government and then selecting absentee voting, and there is a link to the permanent absentee voter list to request being added to it. We have almost 3,000 permanent absentee voters now, so that's a huge increase over the last couple of years. So I'm really pleased that our efforts to promote that service have been as well received as they are. And also, just to follow up on what Kara said, yes, we are still accepting boards and commission applications. That can also be found on our city website by going to the government tab at the top. Then go to boards and commissions, and you can select from vacancies right in the list of boards. We do have a new vacancy on the Parks and Recreation Commission that I just found out about today. So anyone who's interested in applying for that, who might have looked at the list already and thought, well, nothing for me, just a note that that's available now. So we will be collecting those applications through May 15th. Then we'll send them off to the appointing authority, which is generally the mayor. And they will be on the May 26th council meeting to make the appointments. And I believe that's all I have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next, I'm going to go to the Downtown Development Authority, Lena Stevens.
Hey, good evening. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Great. So this is Lena Stevens, the director of the Ferndale DDA. I know there's lots of folks who haven't met me, and if you want to email me, I just want to give that up front. It's Lena, L-E-N-A, at downtownferndale.com, since I can't be there in person to meet you and give you my address. Wanted to second everything that Jordan Twardy said. We are so, so grateful to Oakland County for involving municipalities in the decisions about the small business stabilization grants. That was a wonderful collaborative process, and we're incredibly grateful for the support. As you know, the DDA has joined forces with the chamber and the city. I think, our initial goals, which haven't gone away but have been modified a little, have been to really streamline access to information that, as you know, was flowing like a fire hydrant for the first weeks of the crisis. We've also increased our marketing and promotion efforts substantially. You may have seen our Mother's Day promotion with our highlights of Ferndale's Boss Moms. That was, I think, a really great thing that we were able to do. You may have seen the downtown signage with the fun song quotes about staying far away from each other while you're walking in downtown. Loving stuff like that, doing media outreach to, keep Ferndale kind of relevant and in the public eye, and providing access to free financial planning services. I think now what we're going to be looking at, and Jordan kind of alluded to this, is shifting to how the DDA and the city of Ferndale can be there for the medium and the long-term recovery of our businesses. We've helped kind of get through this first hump, this first, go at this pandemic, and now we really need to look at how do we make sure we stay sustainable through this recovery. So we're looking at some things like a longer term plan for offering curbside pickup for food and retail orders, flexibility in temporary signage that's still compliance with ADA standards. So our sidewalks are still, walkable for people. Also looking into expanding options for outdoor sales. That would be for food and retail, for things like vending, outdoor vending, where people might feel more comfortable this summer shopping outdoors. And then looking at options for new seating areas. We've been looking at ideas where we could activate spaces that aren't currently activated that could have more outdoor seating, or we've talked about parklets, if anybody knows that term, so there might be something fun coming there, or even going a little further and utilizing alleys and lower volume streets to create outdoor seating opportunities. So we're looking into some of those things and coordinating with the city's response, and I've been very grateful to be engaged and kind of brought into the City of Ferndale staff planning part of this. So I'm really excited for that next phase and really thinking about how we can be there a little longer term for the folks. So that's all I have, unless anybody has questions.
No, I just wanted to thank you for addressing one of the comments from someone mentioned during call the audience was about changing our streets over to potential restaurant use or something like that. And so it's encouraging that the DDA is considering these creative ideas as part of the recovery process. All right, just a few more departments. Next, I'm going to ask, is there anything from special events tonight? Is Michael Larry still, Michael, you have anything tonight for us?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, welcome.
Hi. I just want to remind everybody that the Memorial Day Parade has been canceled for this year, unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we'll just have to look forward to next year to appreciate a celebration of in honor of our veterans. Also, just to want to remind you that all special events that were scheduled for the month of June have been either canceled or rescheduled to later on in the summer as of right now. And then other than that, we'll keep you posted on everything as we move forward starting in the summer in June 1st.
Excellent, thank you.
All right, next I'm going to Dan Christ, legal counsel. Is he still with us?
I am, Your Honor. I have nothing this evening.
Excellent, thanks, Dan. And finance, anything from Cheryl tonight?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I just want to put a phone number out there. We are still processing water bills and water payments. Unfortunately, it's just one of those things that continues to work through the system. People are still using water. So I do want to put the phone number out there for payment plans, because I think we all recognize that people are could be in complicated situations, and we do allow payment plans. We work with our citizens and help them whatever their case may be. So our telephone number for payment plans is 248-546-2374. And it doesn't, you don't have to have a reason. It's a service that we've always offered when people have had like a water leak or something like that, and they got a really large water bill they can't handle. This is also a perfect opportunity for us to try and to help our citizens, just make some ends meet when they're struggling. And unless anybody has questions, that's about all I have.
Thank you, Cheryl. And I believe Dan JC, Human Resources.
Mayor and Council, so much has been said, I have nothing else to add tonight.
Thank you, Dan. And then last but not least, our city manager, Joe. Joe, we can't hear you.
You think I'd learn the fourth meeting in. Just a few announcements. Thank you, Mayor. So we have updated and published the fiscal 21-23 virtual budget book. In normal times, this budget book will be available at every municipal building, and we also, as a courtesy, make it available at the public library. The budget book is just a really high-level introductory overview into the city's revenues and expenses, and a high-level overview of fund accounting, all the funds that the city budgets for. You'll also get a letter from the city manager to the community and the city council, which just summarizes a general budget message for the community. And I would say the Cobalt survey results actually did indicate that the city could improve on how we simplify the communication of how tax dollars are spent. So that is something we're going to take seriously in how we move forward with next year's budget process. Lorena, the Parks and Rec Director, did touch base on the cancellation of summer recreation programming. I would add that we did make these changes in coordination with Oakland County public health officials, parks, and other area city managers who are trying to work their way through this difficult time as well. So I do promise that any decisions are made based on the guidance of CDC and our public health officials and in the interest of public safety. And that does include the suspension of the dog park operation as well. That is under guidance, direct guidance from the CDC and Oakland County Public Health. So we will continue to mirror our closure of the dog park as well until further notice. As the mayor pointed out, public park facilities and playgrounds, the skate park, we hear a lot about that, but we are taking the public guidance by the health department as our information to make any decisions. So at this time, until the Oakland County Public Health Department changes their executive order status, we have to maintain our status on closures as well. There are some staffing changes that we're making as a result of this. So some are reactive and are conditions based when conditions change. We have to reassess temporary staffing decisions, and we are doing that as conditions change. In addition, I would add that we're also I implemented a directive for pay freezes for all non-union staff over the last 2 weeks, and in addition, we are instituting a hiring freeze. There was a comment during call to council, or call to audience, sorry, about the election specialist position, and I would add that that was one of the last few positions that was approved during the budget process. Each position that was added was a succession plan. So the succession plan is something that because someone can get in any time. And finally, I would like to just acknowledge we have published our reopening and recovery plan in terms of providing a framework that how we will reopen the community in segments based on public health guidance and CDC guidance. We actually were fortunate enough to be welcomed by the Michigan Municipal League to present to the state and other communities how we're approaching the framework that we presented in partnership with Mason, the city of Mason near Lansing. And so we are coordinating with our other area cities to make sure we have a general common framework and common understanding for how we can reopen our communities and our public facilities safely and to meet the needs of our citizens. So I would be happy to publish that document with the communications department this month to help the citizens understand exactly how we're approaching, how we will reopen all of our government buildings and when.
Thank you, Jim, for everything that you've been doing and your team. All right, moving on to council members. I'm just going to go left to right on my screen here, starting with Mayor Pro Tem Leaks May.
Yes, so I just wanted to share that around this time of year, council would normally be expecting invitations to the commencement ceremonies for Ferndale Public Schools. So council members Mikulski and Bruner James, unfortunately they're not doing that this year hopefully you'll get to see that next year because it's a really moving experience. But I just wanted to share that the commencement ceremonies will be going virtual this year. Ferndale High commencement ceremony will be June 6th at 1 o'clock, streamed on Facebook. University High School's commencement ceremony will be June 6th, 3 o'clock, streamed on Facebook. Also, the Tri-County Education Center's graduation will be streamed on June 13th, 1 o'clock, also streamed on Facebook. So you still have an opportunity to witness what's a really great experience, a moving ceremony, but this is the way we have to do it now, and I hope you all can join and celebrate these seniors as they move on to the next path of their lives. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. Next is Councilwoman Mikulski.
I only had one thing to touch on tonight. I wanted to thank Noelle Briggs for raising the red flag concerning the contract with OLSHA and all the services that are provided to our seniors. For those who aren't aware, I know we touched on it earlier, seniors 62 and over and disabled adults 18 and over are eligible for the services such as lawn mowing, snow removal, and yard cleanup. These services are free for income eligible residents. And in order to get enrolled in that program, you're going to want to contact the central office in Pontiac, call toll-free 800-482-9250, or email info@olhsa.org. And that's it.
Thank you. And next is Councilwoman James.
Good evening, everyone. I don't have anything specific to report, but one thing that's been on my mind that I invite folks to think about and brainstorm with me is an extension of what I talked about earlier about encouraging continued social distancing practices. I know as a small business owner myself and interacting with some of my small business owner friends, we are nervous about reopening. I don't have a business where I have members of the public walking in on a regular basis, but I do have a small crew of employees that I'm concerned about. And then also as customers, as we start to have businesses that reopen or the businesses that are already open, some folks have not necessarily ventured out at this point, but may do so in the coming weeks. And I've seen a lot of concerns raised on social media about some businesses have clerks wearing masks, some are not wearing their masks, some are wearing masks improperly, and some folks don't know how to address these kinds of concerns. So I would invite anyone to just think about these issues, brainstorm them, think about how to best encourage good, healthy practices. And more specifically, I really admire the work that our fire chief has been doing, and I really consider him a local authority on these health issues. So any ways that our city staff can work together with the fire department, with the community and economic development department, DDA and chamber, with the communications department to roll out some of these suggestions and recommendations. Anything that we can do as a city to help promote these good practices among our businesses, among our residents, I think that's going to be really important in months moving forward, because it's not as though we're just throwing open the doors and going back to life as usual. So that's it.
Thank you very much. And Councilman Polka.
Thank you, Mayor. I have two items for tonight. The first, I want to recognize a proclamation that we had on the consent agenda earlier tonight, and that is the one designating May 17th through the 23rd as National Public Works Week. I want to just read a little bit of that proclamation. The impacts of COVID-19 have shined a light on the important role of public service workers in preserving, maintaining, and advancing critical infrastructure and priorities that cultivate community health. The city's Department of Public Works operates and maintains more than 80 linear miles of water and sewer lines, 75 linear miles of streets, 2,500 catch basins, 10,000 street signs, 16 signalized intersections, 140 acres of parkland, 150 linear miles of sidewalks, 154 vehicles and small engines, serving over 10,000 water, sewer, and solid waste customers, and the thousands of citizens and visitors that travel our streets each and every day. They play such an important role in the operation of our city, and a lot of that goes invisible. It's just, you know, the streets are clean, the sidewalks are walkable, the trash is picked up. All of this stuff happens, and a lot of it's gone without seeing the things that actually happen. So I just want to make sure that we recognize and thank these great workers that we have in our city for all that they do. The other item that I wanted to mention is that, well, I'm sure that like many people like me, we've been going through cleaning out closets and cabinets and basements and garages and finding a lot of things that they want to recycle. Unfortunately, Stockra's drop-off facilities are closed for the time being, and there's no date yet set to reopen those facilities. And as you're probably aware, we canceled Clean the Ferndale Up because of COVID-19. And a part of that day was our recycling event for residents to drop off those items that can't be picked up at the curb. Well, I am happy to announce that we have scheduled a special recycling day set for Saturday, June 6th. It will be from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. in the City Hall parking lot. It's going to be a little different than before. There will be more details released, but basically people will drive through. It'll be a drive-through and drop-off process. We'll be asking people to wear masks and gloves, to stay in their car. We would prefer that the people working and helping out at the drop-off point just be able to go into the trunk, pick the things up, and put it off to the side and have vehicles drive off. But I want to make sure that residents are aware of it so they have a few weeks to get their things together. Please don't throw your recycled items in the trash. Hold on to them for just a few more weeks, and you'll be able to drop off those batteries and electronics and paints and oils and all that stuff that we can't put at the curb. You'll be able to drop those things off. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone was aware of that. And that is all I have tonight, Mayor.
Thank you very much. And just sort of my final comments, just wanted to say thank you to Ferndale High School for taking our cans, getting them out of my basement. We dropped off all of our returnables, and I've been told that the school or the boosters filled up their semi in 2 hours. So way to go, Ferndale, in donating your cans. So hopefully they'll do that in another month so I can clean out my basement again. And everybody can take your cans there and help them raise funds. I just wanted to say that I am engaging the Mayor's Business Council. This was started under the former Mayor Coulter, and it's a great idea. I'm carrying it forward. I'm reaching out to all the CEOs and business representatives, calling them and seeing how their businesses impact and how the city can help. And we'll be reconfiguring the MBC in some way, since we cannot gather, but leveraging the knowledge, expertise, and resources of the business owners, the larger business owners in our community. So I've been working on that. And then it is late, and I just lost my final thought. And so on that note, we are done for the evening. I am calling the meeting at 9:58. So thank you, everyone, for participating. Have a great night, and hopefully the warmer weather is just around the corner. Bye, everybody.
Take care.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.